Charles Ingram's life had taken an unexpected turn. A major in the British Army, he was a man of discipline and honor. But behind the uniform and the badges of service was a deep financial struggle. No one knew how bad it was except for his wife, Diana. The couple had long been drowning in debt, bills piling up higher than they could manage, and no matter how much they tried to budget, there was simply never enough money. It seemed hopeless. One evening, Charles and Diana sat at their kitchen table going through their finances. The weight of their situation pressed heavily on them. Charles rubbed his temples, staring blankly at the numbers that just didn't add up. Diana, her eyes flicking over the papers, let out a deep sigh. "We can't keep going like this," she muttered. Charles nodded in agreement but didn't have any solutions. They needed money, and fast. That's when Diana had an idea. Not too long before, her brother had appeared on the hit game show Who Wants to Be a Millionaire and won a modest sum of money. It wasn't life-changing, but it helped. Diana looked at Charles and a light bulb seemed to go off in her head. "Why don't you try getting on the show?" she suggested. "If you win, we could pay off all our debts. Imagine it. £1 million, Charles, we'd be free." The thought was tempting. Winning that kind of money could solve all their problems. But Charles knew his limits. He wasn't exactly the sharpest when it came to trivia. The game required quick thinking and a wealth of knowledge on random topics, from history to pop culture, and Charles was no trivia master. He could handle the pressures of the battlefield, but not the unpredictable questions of a game show. "Diana, I wouldn't make it past the first few questions," Charles said, shaking his head. But Diana wasn't ready to give up. If Charles couldn't win on his own, maybe they could figure out another way. That's when the idea of cheating crept into their minds. "What if we help you along a bit?" Diana proposed, her voice low. "It's a multiple-choice game, right? What if I give you signals, you say the answers out loud, and I'll let you know if it's right?" Charles was hesitant. Cheating? It didn't sit right with him. But the more he thought about their financial mess, the more desperate he became. After all, what choice did they have? Their debts were swallowing them alive. He would just have to be careful. Reluctantly, Charles agreed. They devised a plan. Diana would sit in the audience during the show and subtly cough whenever Charles said the correct answer out loud. It was simple, but it could work. To make the plan even more foolproof, they brought in a third conspirator, Tequin Whittock, a college lecturer who had been a contestant on the show multiple times before. He would sit in the audience as well and help signal Charles by coughing when the right answer was mentioned. With their scheme in place, Charles applied to the show, and soon enough he was called to compete. It all seemed so surreal. Their chance at escaping their financial nightmare had finally arrived. Now, they just had to execute their plan flawlessly. On the day of the recording, Charles was nervous but tried to keep his cool. He entered the studio and took his seat in the hot seat. The first round, fastest finger first, went by in a blur. Surprisingly, Charles won the round, securing his spot in the main game. The producers didn't think much of it at the time. He was, after all, an Army major. Perhaps he had more up his sleeve than they initially thought. But once the real game began, Charles struggled. The questions seemed simple at first, but he stumbled, using 2 of his lifelines by the time he reached the £4,000 question. The producers began to doubt whether he would last much longer. However, Charles had a secret weapon: his accomplices. As the questions progressed, Charles would read the options out loud, and when he reached the correct answer, a cough would follow from either Diana or Whittock. It worked like clockwork. Charles gained confidence as his winnings started to climb: £8,000, £32,000, £64,000. However, as the game went on, the producers began to notice something strange. Charles was visibly unsure of many of the answers, but still managed to pick the right one each time. It was uncanny. Suspicion began to grow behind the scenes. Still, they had no hard evidence of foul play, so the show continued. The final question arrived, worth £1 million. A number 1 followed by 100 zeros is known by what name? Google, Megatron, Gigabit, or Nanom? Charles had no clue. He fumbled through the options, reading them aloud. As he uttered the word Google, a well-timed cough from the audience confirmed it for him. With a deep breath, Charles locked in his answer. "You've just won £1 million, the host declared, the crowd erupting into applause. Charles and Diana had done it. They had beaten the game. Their plan had worked flawlessly, or so they thought. But the celebrations didn't last long. After the show ended and the cameras stopped rolling, Charles and Diana retreated to their dressing room. Instead of reveling in their victory, an argument broke out between them. The tension was palpable as their voices rose, echoing down the hall. Security and producers overheard the shouting. Allegedly, the plan had originally been for Charles to stop at a lower amount, just enough to avoid drawing too much attention. But in the heat of the moment, greed had taken over, and Charles had gone all the way to £1 million. Diana was furious, believing that this decision would get them caught. The producers, already suspicious, reviewed the footage from the game. It didn't take long for them to spot the obvious pattern of coughing that accompanied each correct answer. The truth was clear. Charles had cheated. The next day, Charles received a call from the show's producers. They informed him that his winnings were being withheld due to irregularities during the game. Worse yet, the police had been informed, and an investigation was underway. It didn't take long before Charles, Diana, and Whittock were arrested and charged with conspiracy to cheat. Their trial became a media sensation, with the infamous coughing major scandal dominating headlines. In court, the jury found all three guilty. Charles and Diana were sentenced to 18 months in prison, while Whittock received a 12-month sentence. However, all three sentences were suspended, meaning none of them actually served time behind bars. What had started as a desperate attempt to escape financial ruin had turned into a public humiliation and criminal record. Their plan, while clever in its simplicity, had ultimately been undone by their own greed. The story of Charles Ingram, Diana, and Tequin Whittock is a cautionary tale about the dangers of greed and the lengths people will go to when they feel cornered. At the heart of it, we see the consequences of making unethical choices, no matter how justified they might seem in the moment. Charles and Diana believed they had no other way out, but in their desperation they chose a path that not only cost them their dignity, but also tarnished their reputations forever. It's a reminder that there are no shortcuts to success. Even when faced with overwhelming challenges, it's important to remain honest and find solutions that don't compromise our integrity. What do you think? Have you ever witnessed someone cheat or take a dishonest path to get ahead, only for it to backfire in the end? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.